Kanban from the Inside, 2014, that seems like an age ago. Was that seven years now? A Lean Agile classic, I think it's fair to describe that book. Right to Left, the Digital Leader's Guide to Lean and Agile. What I was doing there was presenting an outcome-oriented perspective on the Lean Agile landscape. I kind of sensing the frustration of so many people whose experience of Agile was one of heads down, plowing through backlogs. Such a mediocre experience delivering such mediocre results. When those of you motivated to come to to meetups and stuff like that, your experience of Agile is probably very different and so much better than that. One of pursuing things that matter. An outcome-oriented view, needs met, outcomes realized, the learning captured from that experience, and that being the engine of delivery and also of development of the team and of the organization. So it was Right to Left. And Agenda Shift is very much focused on the change part of that. How do we put agreement on outcomes ahead of solutions? How do we completely turn that traditional change management view of starting with a solution and selling it to people, starting with a big framework, for example, and selling it to people, overcoming resistance to change, all that stuff, the pain of implementation, and then the disappointment that the results aren't what were sold to us. Turn that completely around. Let's put agreements on outcomes first with the right people in the room, which is really everybody's going to be impacted by change. Everyone who's expected to work differently, everyone whose relationship with the organization is expected to change. Let's agree some outcomes that matter and that the solutions follow that. That completely changes it. That doesn't mean that frameworks don't matter, but it means that we approach the frameworks from the perspective of the outcomes that we want to achieve. It makes the whole thing more granular. It makes the whole thing more humane. So that's really where Agenda Shift is coming from. What if we put agreement on outcomes ahead of solutions, authentic agreement, the right people in the room, and the outcomes that are meaningful. When I say meaningful, a lot more meaningful than 10% more for 5% less. Meaningful in terms of someone's need met, the happy ending to a story, the world changed for someone. Significant, not just the significance of things, not just the quantity of things. So that's what we're getting at with outcomes. Does, however, raise a whole load of challenges, and that's really what this, what this is about. So, how do we go forward with authentic agreement on meaningful outcomes? Well, the first challenge is, that involves a whole new set of conversations that we're not used to having. We're actually very ill-equipped to have. We are so used to focusing on solutions, either the big solution, the big rollout, where where the solution becomes the objective, rather than the business objective driving the solution, or we choose the first solution we think of that might help to solve our problem, or we focus on that. We actually need to change the language. We need to help people understand how to have conversations around things like needs, obstacles, and outcomes, the language of outcomes. Next challenge is turning the results of those kind of conversations into a strategy. I think when people have been, in the last few years, been thinking about, what's the alternative to big waterfall style change? The answer has often been evolutionary change. And even my first book, that's probably the paradigm that was the dominant alternative paradigm to manage change, when that book was written in 2014. But I think quite rightly, organizations and leaders are a little skeptical. Where's the strategy there? How do we know where evolution is going to take us? And what's great about starting to think about conversations about outcomes, we can actually organize the results of those outcomes into a strategy. We can even visualize it. We can use that to help drive the planning, the delivery process, the experimentation process, the ideation process, all those kinds of things. So that stuff's important. And that leads us to innovation at the edges, solutions emerging from the people closest to the problem. What are the tools to do that effectively? How do we keep that process moving forward at a really good rate? And that the rate of experimentation being the driver for the rate of change of the organization. And lastly, how do we sustain all that? How do we make it sustainable in in the human sense? How can this be a process that we can actually enjoy working under? How can this work at that human level, at the individual level, at the level of individuals relating to each other, growing in their roles, growing into expanded roles, starting to look differently at their relationship with their organization? How does this work at team level? How does this work at levels above the team? Departments, divisions, whatever, the organization as a whole, business agility at every scale. So there's some big questions there, but they're the kind of questions that I like. So welcome to Agenda Shift, the wholehearted and outcome-oriented engagement model. Now, I'm not going to define a wholehearted or engagement model or even outcome-oriented just yet, but we'll kind of get to there by the end of the talk. But that's the space we're in. That's what we're about.